Welcome everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Dial Global Virtual Workshop. For those of you who don't know, I'm Rebecca and I'm the newest member of the Dial Global team. And it's my pleasure today to be hosting with the incredible Yvette Forrester. Yvette is Vice President of the Transformation and Programme Management Office at BNY Mellon. And she's been doing some incredible work in her role as D&I Champion and Co-Chair of the Multicultural Networking Group, and also the Co-Chair of the Inclusion and Belonging Committee. So Yvette's going to be covering the employee resource groups and the importance of these in sort of driving change within your organisation. So just before I hand over, make sure you submit your questions into the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll make sure they get answered at the end. So Yvette, very warm welcome again, and thanks so much for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for the lovely introduction. So before I start, I'm just going to give you a little pre-warning. I can see the clouds getting dark outside, so if there's banging and crashing, it's because of our incredibly mad weather that we've been experiencing here, well, at least in London. I'm not so sure for you, Rebecca, in Manchester.
Not too bad yet.
Not too bad, but it's been it's a lovely delight. And so thank you so much for yourself and Francis inviting me today to talk about employee resource groups, which is, you know, I can't say enough about it. I will share my screen where I'll be showing just a little PowerPoint presentation that I put together, and to be honest, it's going to be probably more me talking than anything visually exciting on this, so just giving a little pre-warning there. So as Rebecca says, I am a project manager at the Bank of New York Mellon. I have been at the company for about 12 years. I am also the co-chair of our diversity group or multicultural group called Impact. And I've been carrying that for the last year or so, but pretty much have been involved with it as an employee resource group member from when it started about 10 years ago. And it started because we have a really thriving resource group in the US. And then when we're looking to start in the UK and EMEA, I was part of the initiation to bring it up to scratch with regards to what we can do from a EMEA region. So I'm all things about employee resource groups. And so hopefully, even though the title says to join or not to join, I cannot assure you more than anything else that it is the best thing to do. So I wanted to talk about, there are a couple of differences. There are affinity groups, and there are also what I call advisory groups. So when I did start as an employee over 20 odd years ago in the corporate sector, for me it was really important that I was finding a group of people that I feel I could connect with and have some shared interests with. And undoubtedly that would always be within the capacity of being a member of an employee resource group. Now, it's not the easiest thing in the world to navigate a big corporation. And for me, that felt like the easiest thing to do. Other than that, I did tend to work in a place where I was generally the only person of color in different departments. And so for that alone, it was kind of seeking out a commonality, at least finding people that looked like myself, and perhaps we could have discussions around what it's like to navigate that corporate sector. So it's been a survival instinct for me to find other people, and it's been done undoubtedly through these affinity groups. Now, the other thing that I found is quite interesting in terms of the way I naturally gravitated to it is I studied sociology and anthropology when I went to university. So for me, a sense of working with people, of learning about different cultures has always been something that has driven my energy. So when you start off sometimes with an affinity group, and I call those usually the employee resource groups, there is a tendency to have events which is around how do you you know, the different various cultural foods. So for instance, I had many opportunities to taste Nigerian, Jamaican, Indian, Chinese foods, and also celebrating a lot of significant holidays with respect to those respective cultures. I am also, although I would say a firm member of our diversity group, I am also what I would say a light touch a member or an ally of our other groups, such as our LGBT group, our women's group, our mental health group, and what we also have in the company is our Millennium group. And for me, it's almost like information sourcing. I am nosy, I like to be in people's business, and I like to learn as much as possible. So for me, I have found joining these employee resource groups as a complete and utter benefit. As one of the things, though, to differ between employees resource groups and a business resource group is that, as I said, there's a bit more of a sense of community shared interest within the affinity groups. In the business resource groups, there is a tendency for people to be then more considered as advisors for our senior stakeholders. So we've become the consultants. And I think this is really an important sense of maturity as you look on the continuum when you begin as an employee resource group and ultimately want to be considered a business resource group. So I can't emphasize that there is a journey. To start one can be a couple of people, as far as I'm concerned. To be completely aligned with a corporate strategy, you will need definitely your own strategy within the group. You would have to have your pillars, and you would have to have active members who are like completely committed to driving the business strategy as well. I do think that when we look at some of the areas where you can benefit from it, you can see how it happens from an individual basis, for your career basis. And, you know, I probably will just share a couple of things with regards to how I felt that I have benefited from joining the Impact Business Resource Group, which we are now have become. So I've fostered a fantastic sense of inclusion with my colleagues. One of the initiatives that I've driven since the very beginning, since I was particularly interested in the community partnership aspect of the resource group, where we reach out to charities to see how we can not only introduce people from less advantageous positions to the company, but similarly, how I can mobilize volunteers from the company to participate in activities. So I have, in essence, made a lot of friends at work. And that has really helped me, because in terms of reaching out to different people, you'd be surprised by the interest that they actually have, just with regards to the kind of activities that you can drive. So for instance, our mental health and well-being, we had a lot of things where we were planting in roof gardens in places of East London, which needed help for their community areas. And again, you can see how we can take the interests of individuals and in a voluntary capacity that they feel that they are actually feeling that they are contributing to something worthwhile. So it is a win-win for those who are benefiting from the help that we're giving, and also similarly for the volunteer, the employee who feels that they've done something good, and it really does help with their days. One of the other things that I have found in my co-chair position is the help that we've been doing right now to drive a lot of initiatives. And I'll just tell you, our mission statement really is around driving and embedding ethnic diversity in senior and middle management. We're also looking to promote a representation of an externally diverse talent in external engagement. So we like to pair up with our other peers that are also in resource groups, so we can learn from each other. We also really want to be in the position to champion a lot of our members who are doing well, so they have external exposure. And we're looking to run our resource group in a measurable and quantifiable manner. So we have a tendency to really have great, really concise targets so that we can ensure that we are actually achieving what we set out to do. We're also really into looking at empowering our chapters, and as a resource group and being based in London, we have made efforts to make sure that we are fully inclusive of our EMEA colleagues. So we have what I would call chapters in Belgium, in Paris, in Poland, in Ireland, in Poole, Manchester, Leeds, and wherever we have a strong employee presence. This has really, again, allowed, as a leader within this resource group, to flex my skills. Again, as I've noted before, and I will talk more around the networking aspect, but also being able to reach out to these various regions and find out what is it that's driving them and their activities. We've already seen that in our Manchester, which tends to have a younger cohort, they are very, very keen to encourage a lot of activities where people really do get stuck in. They are deliverers, they definitely do. I do have noticed that we're a bit of the oldie, fusty lot in London, but hopefully we can pick up some of that energy from our Manchester group. In terms of networking, it is, I can't say enough around how, and especially in wake of the George Floyd murder, where we have really come into our own. We've had to have the ability to dig deep, to have those uncomfortable conversations around race, providing consultancy and advice to our senior stakeholders, helping with the carving out of communication. And it has been the busiest I've ever been in this capacity as a member of an employee resource group. This is where the business is beginning to see the true value. I do believe we've always been valued, but in a way now where so many people across the company are reaching out to us. This has been a good time to also, and interestingly enough for a multicultural group, to gain more members where people may have felt slightly reticent around joining such a group, in part because they felt that they might be considered that they're espousing ideas which is counter to the company and don't want to raise their head above the parapet. But what you will see is that it has become acceptable now, and in fact it is a very key component within our performance appraisals, that we do have a diversity goal, and that we do not just attend the odd event, but we are doing something incredibly constructive and beneficial with regards to driving the diversity and inclusion agenda. So what have we been doing then? So we normally hold leadership and diversity training. We have mentoring opportunities that we provide, not only for some of the individuals that we partner with in our charitable capacity, but also for our staff. And what's brilliant is when we can get and harness all the training abilities that we have already in the company and make it very bespoke for this key cohort. And again, you can then see the benefits of belonging to this group, because you get this additional training that you might not normally get in your normal course of work. We like to highlight people that we think are doing great stuff. So we have role model blogs, and we used to, when we were in the office, used to have these breakfast sessions with senior stakeholders who were very keen always to talk about themselves, but of course the attendees would always benefit and can always quiz people in terms of like how they sort of navigated their careers. So it's incredibly been a good sense of a place for people to grow and learn and develop, and also for key stakeholders to have the opportunity to have that, to talk about themselves. And you really do get to know a person through that and can learn from them. More latterly, we've started a Courageous Conversations series. We've been having what we had last week, one around salary negotiation, which was interesting because it was showing that 6% of women, and Black women in particular, have a tendency never to ask for a raise. And so we were giving some top tips in order to break that that myth, and hopefully a bunch of people will be now going to their managers demanding more money. So I hope there was the benefit of that coming out of that. We're also encouraging what I call allies within this, I call social unrest, Black Lives Matter era, to have managers have these courageous conversations with their direct reports. And myself and the co-chair have been participating quite regularly in these sessions, and they tend to be small so people can feel it's intimate enough to be quite open. And where they're having trouble with words such as white privilege and microaggressions, we can have a fulsome conversation about it in a very safe way. So we're looking forward to getting some senior stakeholders who've had those conversations and what they can bring on a panel to the broader audience in terms of what they've learned these last 3 months. So we'll continue with that series throughout the year. I think there was a tendency before for us to just focus on Black History Month in October, but I think given the prevalence of discussions right now around it, that this will be an ongoing series. During lockdown, we decided to create what we call, let's have a cup of tea around the canteen at 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, digital cafe. And literally, because we're all on WebEx or Zoom right now, we are can be quite isolated in our homes. And so what we've decided to do is anyone can drop in and any topic is up for discussion. And that has proved to be quite successful. And our chairman has dropped in unannounced. So we had to make sure that we are always on point in terms of topics, and I think he kind of dipped in to see what's going on the street, so to speak. So we are getting access from our senior people, we are getting more members, and we're getting more interest in the topic of multiculturalism. We also, with regards to network building, and as I said, I do have an interest in most of the other employee and business resource groups, is to collaborate. Where we see there's a lot of intersectionality, which is a very buzzword these days, it's where you're not defined by one characteristic, but you kind of leap over and across multi characteristics. So we're looking to do a piece with our mental health group, where we're looking to talk about Black mental health, and especially in this time of COVID. And that's one of those topics, if anyone knows, that is somewhat, people from the Caribbean or African countries are a bit reticent to talk about mental health. So we're trying to bust, again, many myths around this and saying, you know, and especially in this period, that is quite relevant that we do have some sort of discussion about that. So it's that I'm really looking forward to. I do feel that you can feel up that we're in a state of action. So where we would have been driving initiatives around our recruitments and candidates and internal candidates and promotion and retention of diverse staff, and candidates from the outside, we can see now there is more of a concerted effort across the businesses who want to carry out some action in terms of changing the demographics from what we've been seeing previously. So the relevance of our group and of resource groups and now has been more than I've ever seen in my, at least in my time being a participant. For us to have also had very bold conversation with our CEO in the US, I know for sure that would not have happened in my day job unless there was a massive screw up, and that's the reason why I needed to speak to him. But in my capacity as a co-chair, we have been able to provide what I call an EMEA perspective, because I think notwithstanding we had fantastic messaging from the US with regards to the social unrest, what we didn't really get a sense of is that how does this affect the UK and the surrounding European countries? And I think this is where our voice has become quite loud and sought after, because we're able to give more relevant perspective on what's happening here and how we can affect change. So it's been a busy time. I've had to have some very bold conversations with my manager with regards to how my time is spent on my day job as a project manager, and similarly in my capacity now as consultant, for lack of a better word. So yes, it is definitely a good time to be in a group, and where we can in terms of building network is to ensure that we collaborate as much as we can with our teams internally as well as those externally.
Yeah, actually, there's a question that's come through that does actually cover what you've just said, so I'm just going to ask that one now. So Campbell's asked, obviously with your day job, how much time do you commit to being the diversity champion and also the other roles within the groups, and still sort of manage everything? Is that getting a lot harder recently?
Oh yeah, it's getting a lot harder for sure. So when my manager's always known that I've been a participant of an employee resource group, and I think one of the aspects is to have very open and frank discussions. And when I told her that I'd been asked to possibly co-chair the EMEA group, the initial question is, then how much of your time is that going to take away from your day job? Yeah. And I said, it will take a good half day a week for sure. But I'm passionate about it, so I will work evenings and weekends to make sure that my day job is not lost. But I had to have another conversation a couple of months ago when the ask of us came even more increased, and she was understanding, because I think we're in a time right now where it's very hard to actually say no. You have to be seen to be wanting to drive these initiatives that's become to the forefront. And she, having been a chair for her own mental health disability group too, understood needs must. I am a bit of a workaholic, so I do have a tendency to juggle quite a lot at the same time. So I wouldn't have taken it on if I felt that I couldn't really manage it. But I also want to make sure I'm doing a good job and I've got a good set of people around me. So in essence, it feels like running a mini business of sorts. So it's managing people's expectations, it's managing my time efficiently, it's also making sure that I'm keeping people informed at all times of where I am, in terms of my work, my day job, as well as my my side of the desk job, which to be honest, it's become 50% of my job right now. But regular updates, I have one-to-ones with my manager, so she's fairly aware of what I'm doing and some of the initiatives that I'm driving.
Fantastic. And also on that one as well, Melissa's asked us, so how did you get your leadership to not back you but be in front of you or beside you on this work? So I'm guessing, so how do you get them to be sort of involved?
Question, and that's one that I was going to raise. When you start an employee resource group, it's absolutely imperative that you have an executive sponsor. I would liken our current executive sponsor to being a pit bull, and she is absolutely fantastic. She has really wanted to drive the diversity inclusion agenda. She is passionate about it. She was listed in the Financial Times of one of the senior ladies, allies for D&I. And so you need to have that behind you. Coupled with the fact that now the messaging is coming from our senior stakeholders from the very top, it is definitely cascading down and permeating throughout the company. I will always refer to the sticky middle, the managerial staff who do have the challenges with their employees. You've got a job to do. And similarly, with employees wanting to have some autonomy to drive and participate in some of these initiatives. And so in a way you can see now that the tension is lessened by virtue of the regular messaging coming from the top, and again having a very engaged exec sponsor. So that's made a massive difference. If you're starting off as a resource group, it's imperative that you find the senior person that has the interest. You have to scope that, you have to interview them basically to make sure that they're willing to do so. And there is also the aspect of where they are now very clear, I think, to their compensation, have D&I goals that they need to adhere to. So it's become fairly embedded within the culture.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'll let you carry on now. we'll do
fine. If you've got any more questions, and please do, because I will ramble on. So
yeah, that's fine.
So another area that I feel either you're in it or you're not is whether or not you're an active participant or not. I am clearly, I've always been an active participant. I care about it a great deal. I work in an environment where I've always felt that as a corporation, it's almost like a moral imperative to do better in certain aspects. And so for that reason, I am quite wanting to move the needle as much as I can. So I've always been active. You do have those, I call skirt around the issue, attend the odd workshop, the odd webinar, the odd event, but for them it's feeding their souls as well. So I see it as nothing bad. You will find in most employee and business resource groups, there are those that are incredibly engaged. And I've worked with a core team, I can easily say, for the last 7 years. Which has been fortunate, in fact, because we haven't had any attrition rates, so to speak. But there is always a need to recruit new members. And when you recruit new members, we're doing it more now as a job list. So we have tasks. Do you want to drive events? Do you want to drive strategy? Do you want to drive our recruitment piece? Do you want to drive our sort of membership? And where people have an interest, we're saying, please take it and own it and report to us at a steering group session at some point. So it is very much finding your sweet spot. My sweet spot was around community partnership. And as a result, that is what I'm primarily known for, notwithstanding that I've taken on the leadership position right now. So you do have that. So, and as you will see undoubtedly, then you are obliged to build up a team. You're obliged to have your go-to, your key people, the ones who can navigate, I call technology sometime, in terms of making sure that, we're able to get the right invite out, the right comms out, the right marketing out. It is very important that you have what I call your subject matter experts within your group that you can actually lean on. So I do a lot of scoping out. I try to inveigle our summer analysts to participate, and they are actually encouraged as part of their orientation when they come in to join a business resource group. So that's quite good. And in a way, then we are provided additional resource to drive out some of the initiatives. I must say it's been interesting working from home these last few months and still trying to lead. but it's actually gotten a bit easier. So where we were doing events where it was always, have we got the room, have we've got the, you know, the people that can come to the building. We are straddled between two buildings, one in Blackfriars and one in Canary Wharf. So it's like, who's going to what building, which room we're going to do it in which building. Now it's all on a WebEx. It is a lot easier, and we have larger participation and engagement as a result, surprisingly. So then you have definitely, as a result of this constant, I call networking, the opportunities to do stuff. You know, I have been able to get one of the charities that we partnered with about 8 years ago into a place now where they're considered, where it's a charity for bright kids coming from diverse and challenging backgrounds as potential talent pipeline, because they're so bright, and they wouldn't have come through the natural HR campus way, but it's through the embeddedness of our work with them through mentoring and skills and development and CV workshops over the years that they've become a familiar name, and even with our employees who have volunteered their time to help out. So there's definitely, we've done some great stuff. There's some really good business leaders who are very keen now to say, okay, I need a more diverse cohort of candidates when I'm interviewing for an analyst role, and they will come to us and say, who can you suggest? And so therefore we've become the go-to, and this is another benefit of the wide reach we've had, especially in this time, more than anything else. And then, of course, for members, you get the opportunity where you might be shy and retiring behind your terminal in your day job. You have the opportunity to speak to a lot of people across the company in the capacity as a member of an employee resource group, simply because you have the direct contact with a lot more people than you would in your immediate space. So there is fantastic opportunities for individuals to join in terms of creating a reach and feeling embeddedness. And I do feel, I mean, notwithstanding that I'm at home right now, but that walking through the corridor, I'm able to say hi to a lot of people as a result of my involvement. Again, like I said, leadership is really key, and sponsorship for various reasons. You need to get the right person who's looking after your interests as a business resource group and can navigate sometimes the mad bureaucracy of corporates. So coming to my last slide, it is really and truly trying to talk to this, you know, this last 30 minutes or so that I've been speaking around the value that of having an employee resource group or business resource group in your place of work. The fact that the reliance now on the business seeking out what I call subject matter experts, whether it's around gay issues, whether it's around mental health, whether it's around what the youth thinking. Well, you know, we also have a veterans program, returning program. So we have a veterans ex-military resource group. And so in a way, we have become a go-to source for information as and when, and we meet up at least once a quarter, share ideas. I think we're driving more to see where can we actually collaborate more and more. Ultimately, you know, what is nirvana is that we don't need employee or business resource groups, because all our initiatives or objective or strategies will be fully embedded within the culture within which we work. We're not there yet. We all have a lot of work to do. We all have different interests as well, and I think that this does cater to the various interests that our employee base do have. So it is definitely a benefit, I think, for when you come into a company to seek out the opportunities that these resource groups can provide. And with that, I'm going to bring it to a close and see if anybody has any questions, or if there's any area in particular anybody would like me to talk to.
Thanks very much, Yvette. That was incredible. We've got quite a few actually. So let's have a look in the chat here. There's one at the very start. So from Melissa, who's asking, do you think it's best to keep it regional or can it work globally?
It depends on the size. I think, in fairness, it's almost, there's this element of bespokeness that you need to consider when you are creating these groups. And I think the more bespoke or the more regional, the better, because I know some of the issues that might be happening in the US, we don't have here. They have a fairly established, say, for instance, habit of collecting data, and that's one of my big things that I'm kind of bandering around right now. And regularly on their census or surveys, you know, declare what you are. Are you Puerto Rican? Are you African American? Are you from the Caribbean? Are you Asian, Pacific? Where we don't have that here in the UK, in EMEA. We have GDPR issues about collecting data in certain regions. And I think we just need to be a bit more nuanced around topics like that. And you'll find that for many other examples. And so therefore I'm more start off with what you know locally before trying to do the big tentacles and reach out to your global reach.
Yeah, brilliant. So that's also links in with Campbell's question. He's asking, one of the strategic partners, they're about to set up a group. So they operate across 90 countries across the continent. So where do they start? Would you have any sort of a top three?
So just repeat the question again.
Yeah. So one of the strategic partners, they're about to set up a D&I council group, and they just wondered where to start with that. So from your previous answer, I think it must be start regionally and then grow as you go along.
Yes, and then you're going to look for then what I call your allies, right? You're going to be looking for your sponsors as you reach out. So wherever you start, if you have a clear idea what you want to do locally and say, we were really keen on setting up a New York branch or a California branch or a German branch, you have to be able to ensure that you can find your local representatives and that they can bring to the table what their local issues are. Because again, it's not one size fits all. We were doing a Black History Month session in last year, and we were branding it Black History Month. Now in Belgium, they were like, we don't like that word black. So we're saying, well, then call it Cultural History Month. And we had to be quite aware of what's going on in the different regions. And we'd only know from the local people that are actually there. So I would definitely recommend that you start local first before branching out.
Okay, brilliant. And as well, a similar question, just sort of moving on from that one. Someone else has asked, do you think ERGs can add value with more SME type organizations as well as corporate blue chip type companies? And if so, what would you feel would be the key differences in setting them up and how they run?
Well, first of all, you've got to have the enthusiasm. And I think it's really difficult sometimes. And I was speaking to a friend who works in a small architectural firm. I think she is one of maybe a couple of people of color, and she was increasingly feeling a bit like nobody's talking about what's going on in the world. How do I do this? And I was like, well, why don't you set it up with that one other person? And why don't you find somebody, maybe your manager or a senior stakeholder, that can say, look, there's a couple of issues I think it would be great if we can discuss. Do you mind if we can just have some time and maybe budget or whatever it is to have a, I don't know, a drink session, or in this space now, you know, a virtual session where we can have a frank and open discussion, and hope by way of opening the door in that respect, that you will garner interest from others. It is difficult between the small SME and the blue chip company, because the blue chip company is almost like they might have a strategy at the top of the house, and it's how it's then therefore being cascaded throughout the various regions and locations that you have to be mindful for. As I said earlier, as an employee resource group, you're more like an affinity group. You can do what the hell you want as far as I'm concerned. But I think if you do want to go to the vein of a business resource group, you really do want to ensure that you're kind of aligned with the strategic thinking from the top. So I think it's either way. So from, you know, big company strategy coming down, small company who has similar interests, how do we kind of do it in an organic way to, you know, drive, I guess, membership and ideas and initiatives. Yeah,
brilliant. And I know you mentioned as well, the group's sort of taken off recently after the recent events in the USA. So what do you think is sort of the reason for that? Because it's always been going on, but people seem to have just suddenly woken up to it. So do you have any thoughts on why that is? Why?
It's a really interesting question, because honestly, speaking to some of my cohort within the group, there is a bit of a phenomenon, right? There is this sudden thing which is like, oh God, we're not being gaslighted anymore. People actually realize this is a real issue. And I think, notwithstanding that our American brothers and sisters have always had some level of social unrest, and even the political situation would have driven it, because I do think the current incumbent kind of really drove some of those polarized issues, and I think we're ahead in there. There is also the beauty of devices. So the 3 incidents that happened in succession, or 4 incidents between Aubrey in February in the South, where he got chased down by father and son, that was recorded. The Amy Cooper situation that happened in Central Park, that was recorded. George Floyd was recorded. I know Breonna Taylor is still another issue, but it culminated where actually I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it became evident that as much as it was an overt situation, it was the fact that we had these devices, and the spread of news now is so phenomenal, you couldn't ignore it. No. You couldn't ignore the impact of some of these key events that happened. I was more mortified by the Amy Cooper incident, and I actually haven't watched any of the videos, so I don't, you know, and I refuse to. But I was, by virtue of weaponizing her whiteness, where she was able to, at a switch, change her a perception of what was happening to her benefit, knowing full well this bird watcher guy was going to be put into a box of a black threatening man, and she could switch that quite quickly. And that had nothing to do with politics. That just had something to do with, she knew she had a skin color that would be listened to before the man with his darker skin color. And I think that really struck me more than anything else, that we live in a world now where we've been able to weaponize the advantages of skin color, and to the detriment of those that do not look the same. So it's always been there. I remember some of the discussions that we had when we had a Black History event last October, sorry, with where we need to talk about race. And it was complete sellout, and our speaker was Afua Hirsch. She's a journalist at The Guardian and other venues, and she's done a really great book called Brit-ish. And she just talked to the whole history around the slavery and the vestiges and the remnants from it, and how essentially Black people don't have agency in a system that wasn't really created by them. And I remember thinking it was a complete sellout at work, but hardly any of our senior stakeholders attended. But from us locally saying to our local teams, oh, you should come to this thing, blah, 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 it started this dialogue where it became then people were coming up to us after saying, I just didn't know half of that. That was amazing. And we thought that was a really impactful event to start the conversation about race. So you can imagine our I don't want to say delight, but that it's become top of the table now and people will refer to that. But it's been very hard, but you know, I mean, and it seems quite almost flippant to say I would blame it on recording devices, but that really did help motivate a lot of the movement in a way that I think that Harvey Weinstein did with the Me Too movement. So I'm hoping that this is not a flash in the pan, because I do think people have made a concerted effort to show their support and show that they are looking to make some changes and actually declare it. And so therefore we're going to have some people to hold to account. And you know, we can't deny with COVID as well that there is the added layer of the disproportionate effects on the BAME community. So I think a combination of everything and timing and the madness of the administration in America, and also how it's proliferated, and people are having to, I call unpick these plasters and dealing with these wounds that haven't really fully healed.
Yeah, definitely, completely agree on that one. And in that sort of segues into this question as well. So you mentioned about creating allies. The groups are good for that, but someone's asked, whilst I agree ERGs are invaluable in driving change, do you think there's too much pressure on certain individuals, such as women or ethnic minorities, to run these as a way of educating others? So how do you think you should get the balance right in terms of not being overwhelmed?
Yeah, no, and I must admit, I think my place of work has been incredibly sensitive and attuned to the fact that they don't want me and my other co-chair, who's another Black lady, to feel like we're being overly sort of like, you know, go on, tell us your stories, expose your wounds, and tell us how we can fix it, and can you help us? You know, they've been very, very clear, and I think a general messaging has been that actually you can bring it to light, some of the issue, but you're not obliged to fix it. That's for us who have, you know, the power and the leverage and the, you know, seniority to do so. And I'm quite keen to remind people of that all the time anyway. So no, for sure, the marginalized should not be the fixers.
Definitely agree. So we've had another one regarding mental health. So Jodie said she's really enjoying the webinar. Yvette, thank you. Do you think lockdown and working from home has enabled more open and humanistic discussions? And if so, do you think that this will shift into the workplace culture around mental health and bringing your whole self to work?
Oh, I think so. I think for sure. So the one side of the COVID issue and having to feel isolated from your peers in your homes, that's going to have an effect on people. You know, I've got 2 teenage sons who basically lived in their bedrooms, which I think they're quite happy. I don't think it's less to do with mental health, but we'll see. But there's definitely this aspect of that this is so different that it's going to have some impact on you one way or another. And similarly, you know, you know, I was speaking to a bunch of my friends yesterday around mental health in the Black community, because we were talking about this event that we're looking to do in September, and how people are having to confront stuff that they might have buried before. So I feel I'm quite a resilient person, and but I did have to take stock of the heaviness of the social unrest piece and the COVID piece, and this proportionate amount of, you know, BAME deaths, which is a lot to carry, and try to have the voice to not necessarily fix, but to, you know, to have those conversations with the people that can affect change. So the mental health bit, I think we're becoming a lot more open with it. We have a lot of tools in the company where we can reach out to therapists as necessary. We can have frank discussions with our managers if we feel, you know, they were talking about some people coming back into the office and some people not, and it's really up to them whether or not they feel comfortable, given the whole issue around whether or not their anxiety levels is such that they feel that they still can't leave their safe space of being in the home. And so we've been, by virtue of that, forced to have those open discussions. And I think it's really, really, really good. We have had a series, and I know it's on LinkedIn, one of my other co-chairs of our health and disability resource group, who basically interview several staff about coping with different types of anxiety. And this was pre-COVID, so this was filmed like the year before last. And it is phenomenal how that release has helped a lot of people feel comfortable in self, being in their full authentic self, and not feeling that they need to hide from issues, or better still, feel that they have the license to seek help.
Yeah, definitely. And out of interest, this is my own question, do you see more of an engagement between amongst younger employees, or any specific groups that you think are more engaged in the groups, or is it pretty even?
I think for sure, and I think, you know, sorry to go back to, but the whole Black Lives Matter protest, to see so many young people there, I think it's replicated in the companies now. And one thing I have said in terms of attracting new talent is that what you have now are what we call, I guess, keyboard warriors. They will do their research. They will look at companies and see what they've done during the pandemic. They will see what their corporate social responsibility, you know, they're more environmentally aware. And I think as a result, almost like that energy is in the workplace, where, you know, we do have quite a few young members who are just like, yeah, I'll do that. You know, no, I'm good for that. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll run with that. And I love it because, you know, I call us the other, and the old fusties have a tendency to ponder too much. And so I actually quite like the energy of young people, which is doers. And so, and I think we're cultivating more and more mixed, where I think the older cohort felt like you had to be Black, part of the multicultural group, whereas I think that's less so now, because we are actually multicultural, anyone and everyone can join. And I think there's a lot more, the demographic mix is a lot more broad than it was when we first started.
Great. And just going back slightly to the topic of leadership, Mel's actually asked, so what leadership training have you delivered, and did you do it yourself, or was it safe to use an independent supplier, and did you experience any backlash from the business?
Okay, so leadership training, what we did use an independent supplier. And leadership training we did amongst our managers. Okay. So it was almost like unconscious bias training for the managers or the hiring managers, because we want them to be a lot more open in terms of when they're reaching out for potential talent, and that they have a D&I perspective. So we've done that. There's been no backlash on those training. We've also, the previous chair that we had, he was very keen, I must admit, to provide training for employee resource group active members, which was great, because he understood that a lot of people did this voluntarily and quite passionate about their respective affinities. And so therefore they needed to have training too. And it was one around creating your own boardroom. So making sure you, in your circle, you have the chairman, you have the secretary, you have the, you know, the strategist person, you have the person you can go to and have a coffee with. And I think that has been beneficial. So there's been no backlash. I think it's only good. It's almost like an additional form of training outside your normal bespoke. ones that you might normally have.
Fantastic, thank you. And in terms of going wrong with these groups, so I know you're obviously very passionate about it, and that's why you invest your time into it, but I'm interested to find out sort of where you think some companies go wrong with them, and why they don't seem to get engagement or many people on board.
Yeah, so for sure you go wrong because you don't have the right sponsor. You're not afforded budget. I think what you're seeing right now is that when you have those people, I mean, there's a big debate going on now whether or not active members should be compensated right now, whether it's through money or time or, you know, key performance indicators in your appraisals, because companies are getting value out of these resource groups. So how do you compensate those people that are being quite active? I think it will fail for sure if you don't have buy-in from the top and it's not consistently reported or said, you know, the benefits of these groups is such that you get X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's all of the questions that we've got at the moment, but if anyone had to drop early, feel free to sort of send them in if you're watching on demand as well, and I'll pass them on to Yvette. But thank you, Yvette, for such an in-depth presentation on, I think, what is such an important topic. I think what I've taken from it is just how valuable and important ERGs are, specifically in sort of like keeping the momentum going, because we don't want this momentum that we've got at the moment to stop. So I think these are a really great way to obviously foster the environment where everyone feels safe, and also to just keep the conversations going and keep everyone on the journey on the right way. So as I said earlier, this one will be available as usual on demand. You'll be able to find it on our Mighty Networks, and also we'll be posting the slides and any notes in there as well. But yeah, I think just rounding up the day, really. Thank you again, Yvette, and it's been amazing having you with us. And as I said, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to send them through. But if you are new to Dial Global, then you can find out everything about us on our website, which is www.dialglobal.org. So yeah, thanks again so much.